Kia ora ana, tēnā koutou, aloha nui. Ngā mihi nui ki ngā tangata whenua ki Hawaii, o tātou whanaunga ki Hawaii, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Ko ake tōku ingoa, I'm going to talk about orthography in Cook Islands Māori, o te reo Māori of Waikinui. So, te reo Māori of Waikinui, also known as Cook Islands Māori and sometimes very inaccurately called Rarotongan, is an East Polynesian language from right here in the middle of the so-called Polynesian Triangle, related to all the languages of the Hawaiian archipelago up here, and Māori here in Aotearoa, where I am today, and the languages of so-called French Polynesia over here in the subfamily called East Polynesian. And obviously, we all lived in this moana here for a long, long time without the need for the technology of writing. We were too busy doing all kinds of other exciting things and using other methods of transferring knowledge. And writing is relatively new to our language community and has been both good and bad. So, in the beginning was te kore, and the nothingness I'm referring to here is no writing technology in the moana that we live in, and this lasted a long time and was very good. And then in the 19th century, early 19th century, some new people arrived in this part of the world and devised an orthography, a writing system for our language, which I'll call the missionary orthography. Obviously, their intention was to convert our people to Christianity via writing the Bible in our language, a tried and true method that those people used all around the world. And, as it was in lots of places, quite successful. And they introduced writing. Most people became print literate using their writing system, and it was all well and good until about the mid-1980s, when the people of the Cook Islands started to speak less Māori, our language, and shift towards English due to the various pressures that happened around that time in relation to the population shift in tourism and various other technological changes that were happening at that time. Now, this writing system that the missionaries had devised was, fine. It did a good job while, the population were all L1 speakers of Māori and learning to read and write this system as young children, the way we learn to read and write English, even though English's orthography is really difficult. English-speaking children tend to acquire it after 12 or so years practice, right? And the same was true for children learning to read and write in the missionary orthography in Cook Islands Māori. It had some weaknesses, which didn't really matter in this context, just like the weaknesses in English don't really matter when there's enough knowledge of the language around. But as the percentage of the population who were confident with our language decreased very rapidly, it became a problem around the mid-80s. And this, from my perspective, I say hundreds of years of orthographic controversy. Obviously, it's technically only about 40-ish years, where people discussed the idea of improving that orthography, making it more transparent, so that our increasingly significant proportion of our population who are learners, our true learners of the language, had a easier chance of learning to read and write using the language. And there was, as many people have experienced around the world in Indigenous contexts, there was resistance, there was conservatism, there was enthusiastic over-application of various solutions, and there was all of that kind of stuff going on. And I became involved in this process about 10 years ago now, when I joined in on the very last couple of years of work on what I call the CIMR, which stands for the Cook Islands Māori Revised New Testament, which is a new translation of the New Testament of the Bible that had been started in the 1970s. So I got involved in 2011 or 2012 or something like that, but it had already been going for 30 years by that point, and was coming towards its end. The translation part had finished, and they wanted some help with devising an orthography that was going to be an improvement on the previous missionary orthography. So I was involved in that work. Took quite a long time. Was involved quite a bit of, once again, stress and stressful negotiations and difficulty, but we got there in the end. And so now we have a version of the New Testament, which is quite a long piece of work, using this sort of systematized orthography, which can serve as a reference point for people who are trying to learn it and try to use it, which is pretty useful. A funny thing that happened a couple of years after our releasing our digital version of the New Testament and the new orthography was that another group of people completed the process of digitizing the original translation of the Bible into Cook Islands Māori, and you know, translated it verbatim, digitized it verbatim for archival purposes, so full of all the orthographic randomness that's in that original document. And because people are more familiar with that version of the Bible, it retains slightly higher popularity than our version. So we were like, yay, at first, and then a little bit thwarted again. But you know, that's what happens. So we've also been trying some other ways to disseminate this new writing system, and the big one is the Cook Islands Māori Language Program at USP, the University of the South Pacific, which I've been involved in with a few other people for the last few years. And one of the things we've been doing is trying to teach this group of students who are all teachers. So they're all L1 speakers of Cook Islands Māori who teach Cook Islands Māori in schools, either primary, elementary school, or secondary, high school. So they're all proficient speakers that all literate in the missionary system. So they're relearning a writing system, which is a particular challenge, but these people have got a very curious, open to learning minds and are doing a great job of learning it. And so we've made a few resources to try and help other people get the hang of the system. And I'll just show you a little example here of one of them.
E pūverepa, akranga e toru, kia orana, kia ora. Ko teia pūverepa e katata kāreona akai, me teia rai te tū.
And yeah, that's enough for now. So they're saying this is the verbal particle air, and it is spelled without any diacritics, is what they're saying. And then they go on to explain various contexts where this particular word gets used and how you would recognize it and know to spell it that way. It's all very, very amusing. And if you I'll give you some links at the end of this, but we've got various other resources. Like over here, there's this is a comic showing the various different ways you can spell this particular word that in the missionary orthography is just spelled with the letter E. In the revised orthography, there's plain E, one with just a macron, one with just a glottal stop, and etc., etc. And it's, you know, all a bit tricky, but this stuff is aimed at. And then there's a whole bunch more videos like that little clip that I just showed you there, from my students doing you know, entertaining ways to try and get across these ideas, which is all cool stuff.
Kupu e.
Yeah.
Ai, imenya tsmawene. Ai, akia nani e te Mario, akia nani e te Mario, akia nani e te Mario, apai ko ia taia. Te kita mai nei, no runga I ta mawa kupu I te ta mawa I mai, o te kupu e. Aki anani e te Mario.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Another angle that we've been working on is what I call robot stuff. So this is like, computer tools, computational tools, one of which is a keyboard. A lot of people are probably experienced with having had some difficulties, in the last couple of decades, potentially with inputting your language into computers, whether it's a computer or a tablet or smartphone or whatever, that if you have, tricky and not in European languages symbols, then that's potentially a bit of a barrier, and you've maybe had to jump through a few hoops to get that set up. No one was jumping through any hoops for us until quite recently, so we did it. I had a handmade keyboard that I'd made years ago that you could put in your hand around on a USB stick, and people put it on their own computers, but that's a bit suboptimal and requires getting it off me or someone who I've given it to. So we've now managed to make a Keyman one with the SAL tool, which has a predictive element in it if you have it on a mobile. So that's really useful, because then you're writing on your phone, writing your text to your mate, and it'll be suggesting a word spelt quote unquote correctly, and you might well click on it instead of carrying on writing your whatever you're used to writing. And hopefully that's going to help with learning, or at least recognizing what it all looks like. We've also got an automatic speech recognition tool that is getting more and more accurate all the time, and that when it does its transcriptions of audio, it'll put out the orthography will be the CIMR L1. So again, if people are using that tool, which we're hoping that more people will be using, then they'll get more normalized at that process. We've also got various formats of spell check that are in works in progress underway at various degrees of completeness, but these are all sort of promising tools that more we disseminate them, people hopefully start to use them and get acclimatized to this system. We've also got old-fashioned paper dictionary in the works. It's about 90% done. Look at that, looks like an old-fashioned paper dictionary. It's not going to be built on paper, obviously, that's not that old-fashioned, so it's going to be online, but it's formatted like a paper one. And it is only doesn't have all the words, it's just got the function words, which are the ones in the spelling system that are not spelt phonetically, so you don't have that pathway to try and figure out how to spell it. They're spelt morphologically, essentially, so that meaning A gets one spelling and meaning B gets the other, because the pronunciation is variable in these words. So that's the system. And so this book is going to have all those content words, how to spell them, but also, of course, some information about them, what they do, what they're called, their part of speech category, and all that stuff. So it's a pretty cool little thing. It's nearly done, and hopefully people will enjoy that. But what we've seen continuing in the last 10 years is less aggro, less stress to a certain extent against the idea of orthographic reform. So at this point, most people in our community are keen to learn how to use those symbols, as they're commonly called, which is the diacritics, which are not used in the missionary orthography, but used in our one, which you have in Hawaiian and with the Okina and the, I don't know what you call the Macron, and in New Zealand Māori, they use the Macron. Other Polynesian languages, they also need something to mark the glottal stop. So it's the typical Polynesian diacritics that we need for a transparent orthography, but the established readers and writers are disinclined to use or not sure how to use them, right? This is the difficulty. So there's less disinclination now than there used to be, but there's still high degrees of uncertainty, and everyone sort of does it slightly differently. And so what I describe our current situation is a sort of state of orthographic flux, where people are pretty worried that they're spelling things correctly, but not sure how to do it right, like not quite sure how to access that support, and not really in the habit of looking things up in the dictionary for Māori. Everyone will look things up in the dictionary for English, that's something that people are accustomed to doing and is part of the sort of reading and writing culture. But it's really interesting that it doesn't seem to apply to when people are reading and writing Māori. They don't think to go and look in the dictionary, which is interesting. But maybe we'll make this new modern dictionary and they'll like it better, hopefully. But all this time that I've spent mucking around with doing orthography and writing and all of that kind of thing, this question keeps coming up in my mind. It's like all the stress and work that, this heavy stuff associated with writing and being able to write and read, and who can and who can't, and how hard it is for people, and the amount of time investment that you have to put in to learn this skill is really quite extraordinary. And in English hegemonic context like what I live in and what many of us live in, and other writing-centric cultures in Europe or wherever, it's just taken for granted that we put so much effort into making our children acquire this skill. And the cost of not acquiring it is so high. Like the amount of marginalization that you experience in a writing-obsessed culture like most English-speaking cultures are, that if you don't acquire that skill, you're so marginalized from the sort of economic system. And it's really, we say, oh, we've got to fix writing, we've got to fix the way we teach writing and all that kind of stuff. It's like, maybe we've got to cancel writing, maybe get rid of writing, maybe all writing is from the devil, actually. All right. Thanks for listening to my talk. I don't really totally believe that. Writing's a really useful tool, but also it's got a lot of baggage, and we don't talk about that side of it enough, I don't think. All right. Mate, thanks very much for listening. I've got a few links here if you want to check out some of the stuff we're doing. And if you've had any exciting, positive experiences with teaching new orthographies to an already established community who already has a different writing system, hit me up. Cool. All right.